Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now, Daniel Ricciardo is an 8-time Formula 1 race winner, a Monaco Grand Prix victor and a driver with a wealth of experience in the sport. However, he has endured a difficult few years and his future has, one way or another, been the topic of much discussion for the last few seasons. But it was a decision he took about his future a few years ago that is often regarded as a big mistake. We will get to that shortly, but first let's have a brief look at his rise in F1. Ricciardo, a Red Bull junior who enjoyed a very good and at times successful junior career, made his F1 debut at the 2011 British Grand Prix for Hispania Racing, who would later become HRT where he replaced Narain Carter-Kayan and remained with the team on loan from Red Bull for the rest of the season. Having been a Red Bull Academy member, he then made the inevitable switch to Toro Rosso for 2012 and stayed on through the 2013 season as well. His stellar performances, which helped him pick up 30 points for the team across those two seasons, earned him a promotion to the main Red Bull team where he took the seat of the retiring and fellow Australian Mark Webber, and where he teamed up with four-time Formula 1 world champion Sebastian Vettel. Despite the daunting teammate, Ricciardo surprised many with the way he drove in 2014 as he went on to beat Vettel relatively comfortably, taking P3 in the standings behind the dominant Mercedes drivers of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. With Vettel leaving at the end of the season for Ferrari, Ricciardo was given the chance to lead the team, but in 2015, he was actually beaten by new teammate Daniel Kvyat as the pair finished 7th and 8th in the championship, just 3 points between them. He would remain with the team for 2016, but ahead of the Spanish Grand Prix that year, Kvyat was moved back to Toro Rosso, and the Aussie was joined by his new young hotshot teammate, that's one Max Verstappen. That set the wheels in motion that ultimately led to Ricciardo making what is, with the benefit of many years of hindsight, a huge mistake that will define his entire Formula 1 career. As we now know, Max Verstappen has since become a 3-time world champion, and so from a team perspective, his promotion was the right call in the long run. However, at the time of his arrival, it was not so clear-cut that the Dutchman would be the one who was successful. Verstappen was beaten by Daniel Ricciardo in 2016 and 2017 relatively comfortably. Maybe not a huge shock given the Aussie's experience in F1 compared to the Dutchman, but still an important point to make. It was in the latter stages of the 2017 season though where things started to get really interesting, off track at least. In October that year, Red Bull decided to hand Verstappen a new contract which would see him race for the team through until the 2020 season. No great surprise really, given they had backed him throughout his career and wanted to fend off the interest of Mercedes. But the press release announcing the news included a line from Christian Horner that no doubt will have been a concern for Ricciardo. Horner said, quote, "Max is right to be hungry for success and we are looking forward to extending that journey with him in our hunt for Formula 1 World Championships. As we now look to the long term with Max, he's in the best place in the sport to build a team around him to deliver our shared ambition." We'll come back to that shortly, but going into 2018, Ricciardo's contract was up for renewal, and the general feeling at the time was that unless a team like Mercedes or even Ferrari came knocking, he would remain with Red Bull for the next few years. Things started to change though as the season rolled on, and what happened in Baku, just the 4th race of the season, didn't help matters at all. The two drivers lined up alongside each other on the grid with Ricciardo in P4 and Verstappen in P5. At the safety car restart on lap 6, Verstappen managed to get past his teammate to move up into 4th place, while Carlos Sainz in the Renault was also able to make a move on the Australian. By lap 12, Verstappen had fallen behind Sainz, and so Ricciardo was ready to battle the Dutchman again, and battle they did. Ricciardo went for a move around the outside of turn 1, but the two made wheel-to-wheel contact and Max kept the place through the next corner. On lap 27, Ricciardo tried again and looked to have the move done, but Verstappen fought hard and got back through into turn 2 where they very nearly made contact again. The Aussie eventually got the overtake done though on lap 35 into the first corner. After the pit stops, Ricciardo was back behind his teammate and the battle was reignited. However, on lap 40, the inevitable happened as Ricciardo drove into the back of Verstappen on the run to turn 1 after the Dutchman moved late to defend as they entered the braking zone. It was race over for both of them, with the team left absolutely furious at what happened. Now, the general consensus at the time was that Verstappen was predominantly to blame for the collision, and he did take the brunt of Horner's anger in the post-race debrief. As the days and weeks rolled on though, that view internally at Red Bull seemed to shift at least a little. Interesting comments reportedly made by Helmut Marko in Monaco pointed to that shift too, as he apparently said the goal for the team was to win the title with Ricciardo that season and then the next couple with Verstappen. Comments that when coupled with Horner's build the team around Max statement, everything we've covered in this video so far and the crash in Baku, understandably will have led to Ricciardo beginning to question his long-term future with the team. although important to note is that Horner has always denied that Red Bull's aim at the time was to put all the focus on Max. Despite all of that though, it was still expected Danny Ric would stay put, but ahead of the summer break, things took a very surprising turn. A double-header of Germany and Hungary were the final race ahead of the annual shutdown, and Ricciardo's future was the hot topic of conversation. Renault and McLaren had both made offers for his services for 2019, and he was hanging on to see if others, like Ferrari or Mercedes, might hop in with a last-ditch offer. Despite all the rumours and noise though, Red Bull were still certain he would sign a contract extension and remain with the team. Following a post-Hungary tyre test, Ricciardo hopped onto a plane to head off for his summer break, and it was on that plane where he took the decision not to sign the Red Bull extension, but instead to put pen to paper on a multi-year deal with Renault. A move that shocked many, including Red Bull, Ricciardo phoning Christian Horner later that day to break the news. But why the move to Renault? After all, they were the ones building the underpowered and unreliable engines that had blighted Red Bull across the start of the hybrid era. Well, publicly at least, Ricciardo did cite concerns he had with the Red Bull-Honda tie-up that was set to start in 2019. Honda didn't exactly enjoy a great run when they returned to F1 with McLaren in 2015, did they? And whilst those concerns were totally legitimate, it is still to this day widely believed that the perceived preferential treatment Verstappen received was a big factor in why he chose to leave, or as Christian Horner put it, was running away from a fight. There are many other stories that have done the rounds since he signed and since he left the team, including different versions of the events that unfolded when Ricciardo met with Red Bull owner Dietrich Mateschitz, with Red Bull saying he was offered an identical contract to Verstappen's, but Ricciardo's team saying that simply was not the case. There is also the infamous handshake between the two, which Mateschitz reportedly took to mean that the deal was done and the Aussie was staying put. That, though, as we now know, was not the case. A Formula One career is full of defining moments, whether it be a first win, a collision with a teammate, or a breakthrough season, but deciding to move teams is also a massive factor in that. Ricciardo's decision to walk away from Red Bull was, as already mentioned, a big surprise to most people, not just because Renault didn't really seem like the place to be for the future, but also because he had started so well in 2018 with Red Bull, and frankly looked the better of the two drivers early doors. He won in China with that brilliant dive bomb move on Valtteri Bottas and took pole and the win at Monaco, despite suffering an MGUK failure to get his redemption following the pit stop cock-up that cost him victory in 2016. Whilst his teammate was making some big and costly mistakes, the Aussie was delivering. Must be said though that Max Verstappen's season was really impressive post-Monaco, and he did beat Ricciardo come the end of the season. Moving to Renault may have seemed like an odd call at the time, but Ricciardo drove really well in 2019, beating teammate Nico Hülkenberg, and in 2020 finished inside the top 5 in the standings and took 2 podium finishes along the way. It really wasn't as bad as people like to claim. Was it as strong as it might have been had he stayed at Red Bull? We'll never know for sure, but the answer is most probably not. However, Ricciardo actually told the Beyond the Grid podcast in 2022 that he sees 2020 as, quote, one of the best seasons I've driven in F1, and was proud to get the team back on the podium that year. But it wasn't all positive, as proven by the fact he made the call to leave before the delayed season had even started in 2020. There was a lot of infighting at Renault at the time, perhaps not a huge surprise given more recent events at the same team now known as Alpine, and Ricciardo was shocked at just how badly they were being run by such a big and experienced manufacturer. That ultimately led to talks with Zak Brown over a move to McLaren, a team he rejected in favour of Renault when he signed that contract in 2018. Brown, it seemed, was appointing all the right personnel, and they appeared to be a team on the up, having spent a long time struggling. So it was totally understandable why Ricciardo agreed to join for 2021, and once the official announcement was made, it left the Aussie driving an entire shortened season with a team he knew he was leaving. Awkward. But that decision would come back to haunt him just a couple of years later. His time at McLaren was overall incredibly disappointing and difficult, but there were some high points. Ricciardo won a race at Monza, his first since leaving Red Bull, and although beaten by teammate Lando Norris, didn't have a completely horrific season. He scored 115 points, finished 8th in the standings, and picked up points at 13 of the 22 races. Okay, when you compare that to Norris's 160 points, 4 podiums and 1 pole position, it's not great, but it was far from a total disaster is the point. He needed to step it up in 2022 though, but he did not do that, and it was a very poor season. He was well beaten by his teammate, picked up just 37 points, finished 11th overall, and only managed to finish inside the top 10 on 7 occasions. Not that anybody, rather oddly, seemed to understand why he struggled so much with the car, Ricciardo nor the team. The writing was on the wall though, following 4 straight Grand Prix finishes outside the points-paying positions and following a P13 finish at Monaco, the team's attention turned to signing Oscar Piastri in the coming months. Following the Hungarian Grand Prix and ahead of the summer break, Ricciardo was told he would be moved on, was eventually offered a fairly hefty settlement, and the rest, as they say, is history. So to summarise all of that very quickly, he left Red Bull for Renault, Renault for McLaren, and McLaren for which team? That was the big question. The initial rumours suggested he would head back to Enstone, and team boss at the time, Otmar Safnauer, was apparently very keen on the idea, but that was all easier said than done, given the way he left the team at the end of the 2020 season. Renault CEO Luca Di Maio is said to have felt betrayed by Ricciardo's decision to leave, and so the bridges were burned and the possibility of a route back to the French team was well and truly cut off. That left the Aussie with very little option but to take a year out. He was brought back into the fold at Red Bull at the end of the season as the team's reserve driver, a move that put pressure on the likes of Sergio Perez and Nick de Vries in 2023. And as it turned out, following a tough first half of the season for de Vries, Ricciardo was parachuted in to replace the Dutchman at AlphaTauri, where he was expected to see out the season. An unfortunate crash at Zandvoort, though, meant the Aussie would miss 5 races as he recovered from injury, his place taken by Liam Lawson, who impressed many, including the bosses at Red Bull. It is easy to see why people think the decision to walk away from Red Bull at the end of the 2018 season was a huge mistake, but at the time, even though it was a surprise, it sort of made sense. He wasn't confident about the team's chances with Honda, and regardless of whether the Verstappen favouritism was true or not, he obviously couldn't shake that feeling and didn't want to end up as a number 2 to the Dutchman. A somewhat ironic statement when you consider his actions at the 2024 Singapore Grand Prix. Of course, we are looking back at this with a heck of a lot of hindsight, but that does not change the fact that when you look at everything that unfolded following his Red Bull departure, his decision to leave was an error in many ways. It resulted in a largely unsuccessful move to Renault, which saw bridges burned and made things harder for him when his exit from McLaren was confirmed. His switch to the Woking team also saw him struggle so much that his stock dropped, and despite his vast experience, he became a far less attractive option for teams. All the while, Red Bull, the team he left, were winning races, picking up podiums, and ultimately winning the World Championship titles, as well as wiping the floor with the entire field in 2023. His return to the Red Bull family is a nice story, but driving for the junior team of a team he chose to leave all those years ago just highlights how far he has fallen and why his decision in the summer of 2018 to leave Red Bull was truly career-defining. That is it for this one then, but do you agree again with a lot of hindsight that Daniel Ricciardo's move away from Red Bull was an error? Or do you think he made the right call in the moment? You can let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and to catch up on all the latest Formula 1 news and reaction, head on over to planetf1.com. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.